I'm here because I am a roaring lion crying out righteousness. I want to talk to you about the man from Boston that saved our ministry. And I gave a little bit of a background on Saturday. I've given a little bit of background over the last year. And I don't have a lot more to add except that when we made our first contact in December of 2022, the year 2022 was an August year. It was a powerful year. It was in August, the month of August, that we held our protest in front of the Mellon Bank, the Madison Avenue Baptist Church, and the Smith and Walensky restaurant, August and September. And it was that influence, that protest that we held, that caused, if you will, Warren Buffett to withdraw his funds from the Mellon Bank, and for the American Baptist churches to withdraw their missionary and benefit funds from the Mellon Bank as well. But it was in that year that I ran a video on YouTube. And having ran that video, I got a call. And I get a lot of calls. And by the way, if I don't always get back to you, it isn't because I don't want to talk to you. It's just I get a lot of telephone calls, as you very well know. But I got a call, and I saw the message, a man from Boston. I'm not going to quote his name. And I didn't return the call. I just didn't. I was busy with so many things. It was December. And the next day, he called back again. I just happened to be there, so I picked up the phone and said, "Yes, sir, what can I do for you?" He said, "I saw your YouTube video, and I see they're trying to take your church." He said, "You can stop that and stop it now." I said, "What?" He said, "You can stop that and stop it now." He said, "There are two things." There are two things. Number one is that it's a violation of your civil rights for them to foreclose on a church. That's number one. He said, "I saw your video. It's a violation of your civil rights." But that's number two. But what number one is that you need to defend that church. Fire those lawyers that you have. Fire that lawyer. So what is he talking? Who is this? Who is this? Fire that lawyer, he said. You defend that church. And so it went on like that. I listened to I don't know this man. I get calls from people, listen to my YouTube videos and so forth and so on. I don't know him. He's telling me to fire the lawyer? What am I going to do if I fire the lawyer? But he said, fire that lawyer. And let me parenthetically back up a little bit and say to you, because I'm going to come back because they told me to fire that lawyer. And I went out and hired another lawyer. And he called me again and said, fire that lawyer. Fire that lawyer. And what he said and what I understood after a month from December to January dealing with him by phone, and then finally we started dealing with each other through the social systems, what he was saying to me is that no lawyer can represent the Church of the Lord Jesus Christ. And then beyond that, what he was saying is that he said, no lawyer can represent your ministry. No lawyer can do that. And then he said, my wife and I and my son, we're members of your church. He said, my wife and I and my son, we're members of your church. I said, okay. So I fired the second lawyer. But the reason why I did that, as you very well know, if you've had any dealing with Pastor James David Manning, he's not an easy man to persuade to do anything if he doesn't want to do it. If he's not thinking about that, you got an uphill climb trying to get him to do something. But here's a man I've never seen before. I don't know who he is. He has no references. I asked him about who he was. He said, well, I worked in the legal department of the NAACP for 20 years. I worked in the Housing and Urban Development Department of the NAACP for 20 years. Well, that gave me some understanding that perhaps he understood the legal battles that the NAACP would fight for people who were in their housing process, where they were losing their housing or rental issues, et cetera, et cetera. He did that kind of legal work for 20 years. And so when he talked to me about the legal works of various case laws, I understood he knew what the heck he was talking about. At the very least, he knew what he was talking about. But the thing that I want to say to you tonight, among a couple other things, is that what he said to me on a spiritual level, that those lawyers they don't know how to represent the church. They may know the law, but they don't know the spirit of the church. They don't know what to, they come in as lawyers. They come in to collect their fees, stand before the court, make their pleading, but they don't know how. He said, you do that. God's put you in that church. God's put you as the leader of that church. You lead that church. You fire that lawyer and file the case yourself. And so I did. Now I'm coming. So in January and December, I fired the first lawyer. And so we went to court early in December, mid-December, and the lawyer said to the judge, Judge Beckerwith, that my client has fired me. Judge Beckerwith said, well, all right, I'll give you 30 days to get another. So I went out and hired another lawyer. We went back to court in January. And at 6 o'clock in the morning, I had been praying. You do my oblation hour prayer. And at 6 o'clock in the morning, the lawyer I had just hired a week earlier, I sent her a text and an email and said, I'm firing you. By the way, and that was the day we were supposed to appear in court before Judge Beckerwith. We were supposed to be on a Zoom court called Court Solutions, I think it was. We were supposed to appear in court that very day at 10 o'clock. At 6 o'clock in the morning, because of what this man from Boston said to me, I got up off my knees at 6 o'clock in the morning, sent that woman a text, and an email said, you're fired. Well, I didn't say it ugly like that. I just said, I want to remove you as my attorney. 10 o'clock, we're on a Zoom meeting with Judge Beckerwith, and Judge Beckerwith asked, both lawyers are there now, because the one lawyer could not be relieved until I got a second lawyer. So the judge asked the lawyer what be the matter, and the lawyer said, I just got a text this morning, Judge, that I have been fired. I shouldn't say it like that, but that was the summation. So Judge Beckerwith had this bizarre look on her face. Backing up with Judge Beckerwith when we first brought the case, my pro se, the bankruptcy case, she said that this church hires 14 people. It feeds people. It has a soup kitchen, has a school, has a homeless shelter. And this matter is being brought. The bank is bringing this matter. And she also said, I've read through the entire history of the proceedings of the case. And she says, I see a lot of problems with the case. And she was very, very understanding. And in fact, she went out of her way to understand, to say that, listen, this doesn't make sense. She was very lenient. The lawyer kept pushing to have the automatic stay moved. She wouldn't do it. She told him to sit down and don't you file another one until I tell you. And she was very helpful and very compassionate. Because anybody who reads what's happened to us, if you got anybody have a heart, would have to say, this is just absolutely unfair what's been done to this church about a water and sewer bill, a toilet bill of a church that educates children and send them off to college to be doctors and lawyers? Are you serious? You're still doing this, New York City? At any rate, so I fired that lawyer. And Judge Beckerwith said, well, I don't want to rule on the case of the dismissal until you have a lawyer. So that was in January. We were scheduled to get back to court. I think we met on January the 5th or 6th or something like that. And I'm still talking to the man from Boston, right? He's still telling me, you're the only one legally and spiritually can defend that church. I said, but I'm not a lawyer. He said, you're the only one that can legally and spiritually defend that church. These lawyers do not have permission or authority or understanding how to defend this church or the ministry. So I said, all right. And I fired 2 lawyers, putting this church at wide jeopardy on a man I've never seen before. His face I'd never seen. His name I'd never heard. But there was something in his voice. There was something about the way he talked to me that he understood how dynamic and how precious this ministry is. He didn't push this ministry off as fly-by-night or a general church, and people just meeting and singing and dancing and taking up offerings. He understood something that at the time he was teaching me. I know it's my job to represent every member of this church. I know that's my job. Nobody comes above me as far as that is concerned. I know that, except Jesus. But I never thought about it in the legal context. I never thought that even legally, even though I don't know the law, I know enough about God. I know enough about life. I know enough about this ministry to defend this church. And so I fired that lawyer, and the judge said, well, I'll give you one more time to get another lawyer. Let me say this parenthetically. The first lawyer I fired, his name was Louis Siegel. We have presently brought against him 2 malpractice accounts and 1 ineffective counsel charge, 2 malpractice charges rather, and 1 ineffective counsel charge we brought against him. And we brought it to the New York State Bar Association. We filed it on the 22nd of March. It's last time I talked to them, they're still investigating. He's hired a law firm to defend him against these 2 malpractice. Now, this is not Mark Anderson. This is a different case altogether. But this is the first lawyer I fired. And I said to this Louis Siegel, I said to him, because our issue during that time of the bankruptcy proceeding was that Bethelite doesn't have an income, and that's who the lien has been made against Bethelite, not ATLAH. ATLAH receives all the income. Bethelite has no income. It's just static. And so I tried to say to the lawyer, I said, tell the judge and tell the trustee that in a church situation, we have all things in common. Mr. Engineer, I'm going to ask you to bring up Acts chapter 2, starting at verse 43. They were willing to give us a plan in order to be able to pay off the loan or the lien or whatever it was. But we had to submit a plan that the judge would approve and all the creditors would approve as well. But Bethelite does not have income. Bethelite, all the income that comes here, so I had some people change their income to Bethelite briefly. But I said to this lawyer, with all the passion I could, I said, please tell the court that churches have all things in common, whether it be Bethelite or ATLAH. The Bible, the legal document of our church, gives us the opportunity to have Bethelite supplied by ATLAH. Here's what I asked him to do. And he said, I'm not going. He said, you can do it, but I ain't doing it. And he said it very arrogantly to me. You can do it, but I ain't doing it. And here's what the word of God says. And fear came upon every soul, and many wonders and signs were done by the apostles. And all the believers were together and had all things in common. That is to say, this church, that church, this believer, we had all things in common in verse 45. And they sold their possessions and their goods and parted them to all men as every man had need. Now, I'm going to ask you over the next couple of days to cash in those holdings, whether it's your savings account or whether it's your retirement programs. I'm going to ask you to cash those in. You don't have to do it. When I ask you, you're not under any forceful act to do it. But in the early church, people sold their possession and they had everything. Everybody had everything in common. Some people had more than others. Some people had less than others. But they had all things in common in the early church in its formation. And they continued daily with one accord in the temple, breaking bread from house to house, and did eat their meat with gladness and singleness of heart, praising God and having favor with all people. And the Lord added to the church daily such as should be saved. Thank you, Mr. Engineer. I said to that lawyer, I said, tell the judge that. It's all right to quote scripture in a court. The Bible is not outlawed in court. He said, I'm not doing it. So I fired him, but not because of that. I fired him because the man from Boston told me to fire him. I also want to say to you that I ran this YouTube ad, and this man saw the YouTube ad, and he called me and said that, he told me that it's your job. Do not depend or rely upon a lawyer to represent you. So I fired 2 lawyers. And one of them, quite frankly, the last one, Rachel Blumenfeld, I thought was going to make an excellent lawyer. She was all into it. And God had given me some things to say about her, but he said, no, she can't represent this church. I want to look deeper at, as I go forward, how does the Vatican, when it has a claim, someone makes a claim against the Vatican, what kind of, do they hire outside lawyers, or are the cardinals and the priest within the Vatican structure of the Catholic Church are the only lawyers that represent, and they represent only at the agreement or the blessings of the Pope. The same thing with the Jewish faith. How are those how's the Jewish temple, how are those organizations represented? Because Christians usually go out and get a lawyer from outside. But this man from Boston was telling me something that I did not know. He was telling me something. He said, only you can represent that church. Only you. Now, Elizabeth had told me sometime earlier, saying, why don't you represent the church? I said, I don't know the law. That's not the point. Trust me, it's not the point. I'm going to show it to you in just a moment. And I posted this ad. I posted 2 ads in the New York Times. Let me tell you what happened. I want to tell you why this man called. I posted 2 ads in the New York Times, and I got a call from the New York Times. The first time it ran, a Jewish leader said, I'm a rabbi here at a Jewish temple on the east side, and I just read what they're doing to your church. He said, I need to talk with, I just put the newspaper down. I need to talk with some of my fellow friends. He said, we're going to stop this. This should not be happening. We are going to stop this. Let me just talk to my friends, and I'll get back to you tomorrow. This Jewish man, he hung up the phone. I said, well, praise the Lord. So the next day came, and the phone didn't ring. The following day came, and the phone did not ring. But because he was so emphatic about saying, we're going to take care of this for you. We're not going to let them do this to you. So the third day, I think, well, why don't I give him a call? Maybe something happened. Third day I called. He did pick up the phone. I thought he would not. I said, well, I'm the church up here in Harlem and having this problem. He said, yeah, I know, but I can't help you. I'm sorry. I said, is there a reason why? He said, I can't tell you why. And hung up the phone. I said, all right, okay. The next time we ran an ad, and by the way, we got a lot of calls from all over the place. We got a call from a man who owns the stockholder in the Aspen Group. It's a major Wall Street listed stock listing. And he is the owner of that Aspen Group stock. And he called me and he said, what is this? He said, this is really bad publicity for a bank to be closing in on a church, foreclosing on a church, he said to me. And he said, I'm going to go, I'm a stockholder. I'm going to go talk to the Mellon Bank about this and see if we can't resolve this. He said, be ready to come downtown to meet with the bank tomorrow. I'm going to set up a meeting with them. So just be ready for when I call, I'm going to set the meeting up. And so I said, okay, well, that sounds good. And he was a Hammack brother, too, by the way. He said, I can solve this. I've been involved in stocks and banks and trust companies and assets. He said, I've been doing this for years. I can take care of this for you. And then the next day came, he didn't call. Get the picture? The next day came, he didn't call. So I called him back, and he said, what is it? How do they say it? Your community, your public statue in the community needs to be cleaned up. Saying that my statements against my strong biblical beliefs about homosexuality, he thought, and once he found it today, when he first called, he didn't know that. Same thing with the Jewish leader. When he first called, he didn't know that my biblical beliefs were against homosexuality. And both of them ran up against a rock wall. Nobody wants to help me because of my beliefs, except the man from Boston. He called. And when he called and said to me the things he said, and I fired the lawyers that we were maintaining at the time. And there was one other person that called me who was a bankruptcy lawyer. Had been a bankruptcy lawyer for 40 years and had retired. His wife called me from California after reading the New York Times. She called and said, I'm calling on behalf of my husband because here's the deal. I had an attorney at the time. He's an attorney. He can't speak to me. He can speak to my attorney, but he can't speak to me. So had his wife call. You got it? So his wife called and said he wants to help. He see what the church is going through. He's been dealing with bankruptcy proceedings for 40 years. He wants to help. I said, well, I'm glad to hear that. Praise God, all the help, the more the merrier. And so I called this attorney, Lou Siegel, right, who was attorney of note at the time. I said, this is good news. We got another attorney, somebody to come on board to help you, and we can really fight this. He's been doing this for 40 years. And Lou Siegel said, no, I don't need his help. You say, well, Pastor Manning, you didn't need the man from Boston to tell you to fire that. You should have fired him right then. When an attorney is willing to give you pro bono help and he won't accept it. I mean, why can't a legal team? And here's a man who's praying for us. His wife is praying. She said this thing. She said when he heard what was happening at our church out in California, he couldn't sleep at night. They both couldn't sleep. They both prayed and couldn't sleep at night. This is what she said to me, how worried they were, how unjust this is, how awful it is that's happening to her. And he wants to help. And my attorney said, no. So I don't know if the man from Boston had not come. It looked like I would have had enough sense to fire this Lou Siegel on my own. Anyway, I have filed two malpractice charges against him, and they are valid, and an ineffective counsel against him as well. Rachel Blumenfeld, she only stayed on for 1 week, and she was gone. So on February the 8th, after I fired Rachel Blumenfeld, we had our final date. Judge says, all right, Judge Beckwith will have our final date, and we'll come to a decision about what to be done at that time. So it was a cold morning in February. It was a cold morning. And the Eastern District Court is a cold building. Ella LaFleur and I went in there. The hallways are long and dark. There's nobody in there. The courtroom looked like they're empty. And only Judge Beckwith, the bankruptcy lawyer, and the trustee, and my attorney, they were there. And so the judge was preparing to dismiss the case. And I said, Judge, may I have a word with the court? She said, sure, Pastor Manning. She knew exactly what. I got up and I went on for about 15 minutes about the court and what we've endured. And she said, I hear what you're saying. She let me do that, by the way, which I will be forever grateful to her for that. And but she dismissed the case. At that point, I had nowhere to go. At that point, there was nothing I could do. Bethelite didn't have an income. I couldn't qualify for a mortgage. I'd exhausted all the legal remedies. The courts had entered that the property should be sold. A date had been set for the auction, and I had nowhere to go. I had nowhere to go. It's an awful feeling to know I'm getting ready to lose all of this. There's only one thing. This man from Boston kept calling. He just kept calling. Fire that lawyer. He said, no, here's what you do. File a civil rights violation. He said, listen, that building, he said, you told me the church was founded by a World War II veteran. That's a violation of their civil rights to take a property or a church. And he said, are there any veterans, military veterans living in the building? I said, no, but Elder Butler, he was a military veteran. He once lived in the building. Did he live in the building during the time this action was going on? I said, yeah. He said, well, that's violating your civil rights. If that man lived in that building as a World War II veteran, they cannot file. He said, you go and file a lawsuit. You file it, pro se. Then he used this fancy Latin term on me, trying to get it. That woke me back up because I had nowhere to go. It was all over. It was all over. So on March the 17th, after some meetings and deliberations, I made the decision. I'm filing. I don't know the law. I don't care. The man told me all I need to do is represent this church. So I put together a 55-page complaint. And I marched to the federal court building and stuck it in there and filed it, and it stuck. Ella LaFleur was there with me. We were both nervous as all outdoors. when we stuck it in, we were waiting for the next couple of days for them to kick it back out. This ain't nothing. This ain't nothing. Get ready. Get out of here with this thing. That didn't happen. Day 2 went by. Day 3 went by. And we finally got a notice that it had been assigned to a judge. Good Lord, man. I said, wow, this case is not, they didn't kick it out. They didn't throw it out. They didn't. It was assigned to a judge. I would like to say this, that pro se case that we filed in March of 2023, a year and 3 months ago now, as you know, we got a decision on it this past Friday evening. Decision came Judge Schofield after having 2 online meetings with her. I'll check with Captain LaFleur on this, but I think there were 80 different filings. I filed several responses to their motion to dismiss. They filed several motions. The judge made several statements. Over the course of the year and a half, there were 80 different entries of the motion on this motion, meaning it was standing. It withstood that long. It withstood that long. And then there were 2 meetings with Judge Schofield herself on this issue. And then recently I filed a second motion. What was a reply? I said it was an amendment, but it was really a reply to what the defendants were doing and saying. But on this past Friday evening, Friday late evening, the decision came down from Judge Schofield that she was dismissing, or she was granting, the defendant's motion to dismiss. In other words, the case I filed on March 17, she was finally throwing it out. And she granted that motion. But what I want to do here, in addition to talking about the man from Boston who gave me the courage to do something that I don't think even Elizabeth could have encouraged me to do, but a man that I did not know. And I understand clearly now what he was saying about my responsibility is to defend this church in any courtroom on the planet. That God put this church in my hands. God put this church in my hands. And that's all he was saying to me. Defend it. Get up there, and God will speak for you. But here's what I want to say about the decision, because we want to talk perhaps a little bit later on at some other time we have about the Strength to Strength Increase Project. When the judge gave that decision on this past Friday, she had a segment. She was very thorough. She covered every aspect of my 55-page complaint. There was not one thing that I addressed or complained about in that 55 pages that she did not address with case law in the 12-page decision. But one of the things that I did not address that she did address in that decision, it wasn't just a decision, but it was a decision and an opinion. And I'm going to ask the engineer to put the page up full screen so we can see what she did. I did not in my filing on March the 17th, I did not file for Bethelite. I did not say anything that Bethelite had happened to Bethelite in terms of his injuries. But here's what she said. She had an entire segment, an entire page on injuries to Bethelite. Now, what she ruled in that ruling was that I, James Manning, don't have standing, that the lawsuit was not brought against me. I'm trying to do a third-party entry, and it won't work. She bounced it back. Not just that, but she said that the district court does not have standing or subject matter jurisdiction over state tax matters in the federal court. And she bounced, the entire case got bounced, that she didn't have the jurisdiction to rule on it. Nor did I have standing. My claims were invalid, as she said, in a word, because the case was not brought against me. But what she did say, and I did not expect, was that there were injuries to Bethelite. And that's the key there. And I'll discuss that more. I don't want to go further into that aspect of the fact that that a federal sitting judge in a district court says that Bethelite or there were injuries to Bethelite. That's all I'm going to say. I've been advised not to say a whole lot these days. But that the defendant's attorneys, they already know that. They already see that. You can drop that, Mr. Engineer, that the judge has said there were injuries to Bethelite. To give a 12-page decision, in my estimation, now I know you may disagree with me on this, some of you will not. But I consider that a victory as a pro se lawyer. And the first time I ever filed anything in court, to get that far, to get a judge to sit down and take the time and write a 12-page decision on what I did as a pro se attorney, I consider that quite a victory. And again, for her to address the issue that Bethelite was injured, I consider that also. What I plan to do, I do plan to file, as you know, the $500 million lawsuit against the Mellon Bank in the city of New York. We have an attorney now that will file that suit. As Judge Schofield stated, that no corporation can appear before the court without being represented by a counsel. And so we have a counsel now. We have a counsel, a very, very, very qualified counsel, and we will be making that filing. We're just working on some tweaking to get it, and then we're going to drop the bomb. And it's going to be quite a dropping when we do. And that will be filed by an attorney and not by me. But here's the thing. In addition to the fact that the man from Boston said to me that I'm responsible for this church. Now, I'm responsible, not Lou Siegel, not Rachel Blumenfield. I'm responsible for this church. By the way, I tried to get Mark Anderson. I pleaded with Mark Anderson, please get me before the referee so we can argue this 18% interest. He wouldn't do it. As you know, we got a legal malpractice suit against him as well. Should be coming to fruition within the next 4 to 5 months for more than $4 million. But he wouldn't do it. He wouldn't do it. I said, Pastor Man, how can you get so many bad lawyers? Well, let me tell you about the good ones. When Jones was here, he was my son. He came to this church. He just graduated college. He was in his early 20s. I sent him over to my alma mater, Union. He studied there for 3 years, got a master's degree. He didn't want to do pastoral work. I sent him down to Vanderbilt Law School at Vanderbilt University in Tennessee. He got his Juris Doctorate there in Vanderbilt and came back and started working as corporate counsel for the church. And when he went to court with us, we won. In the early stages of this, when Jones was representing us, we won. And the reason why we won is because Jones understood the church. And other lawyers, they just don't care. These paid lawyers, they just don't care. But Jones, when Jones was representing us, we won. Now, Jones had some issues, and he dropped the ball. But I still will welcome him back to this church. Now, we have another attorney came to this church with her father. In her early years, I think she was in grade school, middle school. And she graduated our high school. And she went off to St. John's, got a bachelor's degree. And I think she went and St. John's again and got a master's degree. I think she worked for the United Nations for a while. She even worked for the Waldorf Astoria Hotel in New York. Still know what she was doing working there. See, what the man from Boston was telling me, if people are going to represent the church, they got to be members of the church. They got to have the spirit of the church. They got to have the spirit of the pastor. They got to have the spirit to believe the impossible. They got to have the spirit to believe. They got to have the spirit to see this not just as a legal matter of case law, but to see the spirituality of this. Jones saw that. This attorney we have now has been in this church for more than 20 years. She sees that as well. And so we're back in business. And we're going to win. And we're going to win big. So the man from Boston had some wise advice. And it wasn't until this attorney stepped forward, who's now willing to, by the way, those of you who feel I'm treading upon you by asking you to make contributions to this ministry and that you don't know what's going to happen to you if you go ahead and do what you know you can do in terms of contributing to this ministry. This young attorney has given up her career. She's given up a a career in law to represent this church, win or lose. Because as the Jewish man who said he was going to stop this immediately found out that I'm anti-homosexual, he dropped it. As the man who's the leader of the Aspen Group, the stockbroker, the stock owner rather, whatever he asset manager, when he found out that I am anti-homosexual, he dropped me like a hot potato. The word is going to get out. And her career will either be made or she could lose an opportunity to run with the horses in the legal profession by taking us on as a client. But I want to thank the man from Boston. Had it not been for him, everything would have gone because I had nowhere to go. And I want you to understand as well, ATLAH, that if I had not filed that pro se complaint and believed in it, I still believe in it, quite frankly. I'm going to file another one. Yeah, I'm just getting started. You ain't seen nothing yet. But ATLAH, I need you to know something. Had that man from Boston not called me, I wouldn't be here tonight, neither would you. Had he not called. I filed that complaint. I believed in it. It hung around the court for a year and a half. Judge Schofield believed in it. Judge Schofield took her precious judicial time and did a thorough 12-page decision and opinion on what I, James Manning, pro se, presented to that court, that it was worthy of her time. It was worthy of her decision. And finally, Judge Schofield said this: her ruling to dismiss was without prejudice. That is to say, both Bethelite and I, should I seek to do it, can seek to bring this matter and seek relief in state court. That was the last paragraph. But sometimes when you reach the very end of your rope, I'm not going to tell you because I don't want you to know. I don't want you to know the Pastor Manning that was on his knees during those years. And by the way, the man from Boston didn't tell me about what you refer to as the civil rights violation of me, the 42 USC 1983. He just kept saying, they're violating your civil rights. I got down on my knees on my birthday on the 20th of February, the year 2023. I got down on my knees. And it was a hard time. It was a cold time. And I'm thinking, I worked all these years to build this ministry. We've got over $10 million in equity in this property that belongs to us that we have built for 40 years. $10 million or more dollars that if we sold this building on the market outright, that is what the church could collect. And now we're going to lose it all just like that for a $36,000 water charge. Millions of dollars gone. And the banks and the pitch those Negroes and the homos are getting rich off of taking poor people's property. Well, all right. $36,000, we lose a $14 million building. And nobody would help. Well, no, let me say that. The lawyers wouldn't help. Judge Beckerworth did. But I got down on my knees. I got down on my knees on the 20th of February. And the Lord said, Google tax lien law. Because the man from Boston encouraged me. He got me to do something that I hadn't seen in myself. I just didn't see it. I thought at one time I wanted to be an attorney. But I was scared to go before those courts. I was scared to stand before those judges. I was scared to stand over against a group of lawyers. And the Philip Little law firm got a whole crew of them. They got a whole law offices everywhere. I'm thinking, I'm scared. I wasn't scared. Let me just back that up. I'm thinking to myself, how can I stand over against those lawyers? Just little old me. I forgot that Bible verse that Jesus said. So I got down on my knees on my birthday on the 20th of February. And the Lord said, in the Google tax lien law, and I got right up and did it, and whoa, it just kept. First it came Letitia James, the Attorney General for the state of New York, says that the tax lien law was unjust, it was discriminatory. After I read all of what she had to say, then here comes Mayor Eric Adams, same thing, saying that when he runs for mayor for the city of New York, he's going to run against the tax lien law. He's going to have it abolished because it's destroying generational wealth. It is discriminatory against brown and black people. It just went on and on. And then from there, the city council president, Adrian Adams at the time, who makes the legislation and makes the laws for the city of New York, also stated that the law was discriminatory, it was destroying generational wealth, it was unjust, and predatory against black and brown people. They finally voted to kick it out of the process of being used altogether. They voted it down, voted it out. I just kept reading and reading and reading till 10 o'clock that morning. I said, well, Lord, have mercy. Talk about a ram in the bush. Talking about a ram in the bush. And my spirit lifted. I don't want to get into my personal thing with you. I just want to tell you, I was in a bad place. I was in a bad place. And I think that the man from Boston actually drove down here when I discussed it. He said, I'm coming down there to see you. He got in his car and drove down here. And he gave me some techniques on how to file, what to do, et cetera. He said, now file that case. And I've been breathing ever since. I've been breathing ever since. It ain't over with. No, it ain't over with yet. But we are pretty much in the winner's seat. I don't see how they're going to be able to win this decision. This matter. I don't see how they're going to be able to stand over against the fact that all the major legal officials in the state and the city of New York have declared this law to be unconstitutional. And Bethelite, the attorney that we have now, will file on behalf of Bethelite. I will file pro se because there's something I want to establish now. I've been hurt. And I'm angry. I know that anger is a temporary insanity, but you can call me insane. I've been hurt. And not so much what they've done to me, but what they've done to this church and what they've done to other people. The church right next door, they foreclosed on it. Mellon Bank did. The building across the street. That building you see right there, that building right there, they foreclosed on that building. They are monsters, robbing and stealing from people left and right. No, I'm going to file. Let them throw I'm going to file in state court. Let them throw it out. Let them throw it out, but it ain't going to be easy. And then, of course, we're going to file in state court on behalf of Bethelite. The funds that we're asking for, before you make any further decisions, I want you to listen to the ministry, to the teaching I did called It's Time to Go Higher. I want you to listen to it before you make any further decision. We may lose some people in this process. We very well may lose some people, just not going to do it. But listen to that and then decide what you're going to do. Well, I thank y'all for listening to my heart tonight. I'm pretty coy. I usually don't show that side of me.